How does the world react when not just one, but entire groups of people disappear without a trace? What happens when hundreds of souls are suddenly unaccounted for? These compelling stories of unsolved mass disappearances will captivate you and raise many questions. Is there a dark secret behind these incidents, or even supernatural forces? Dive into these mysterious cases with us and try to understand the incomprehensible. Anjikuni Lake Incident. Fur trapper Joe LaBelle knew that Anjikuni Lake in northern Canada wasn't exactly what you'd call a metropolitan area. And yet, even though the lake was buried under a layer of snow and ice for half the year, it still provided an important resource for the native Inuit for fishing and trade. Accordingly, there were several villages on the shores of the lake, which served as homes for the Inuit and as welcome resting places for the fur trappers passing through. However, what happened there in 1930 remains a mystery to this day. An entire village community simply disappeared from the scene and have never been seen again since. When Joe LaBelle arrived at the settlement in question, he was disbelieving to discover that there was no trace of the 25 men, women, and children who usually lived there. Had the community possibly decided to pack up and move on? Well, that's possible, but highly unlikely. In fact, it seemed as if the villagers had been there just moments ago. As he walked around, Joe spotted incomplete clothes with pins still stuck in them. There was even a fire still blazing under a pot of burnt food. In each hut were the personal belongings of the inhabitants, and the food and fish supplies were also complete and untouched. Had a terrible robbery or mass kidnapping perhaps taken place here? Well, that too is far from likely. There were no signs that a struggle had taken place here. In the end, Joe did what probably anyone would have done in this situation. He went to the nearest telegraph office and informed the police. On the way to the ghost village, the summoned lawmen again took a short break at the local trapper Armand Laurent. There, the police officers were learned something that sent them into a state of incredulous shock. Armand stated that he had seen a strange, shimmering flying object a few nights ago. But that was not all. When the men arrived in the Inuit village, they found that the graves at the edge of the settlement had been broken open. More still, the appropriate corpses had dissolved proverbially into air. Even more bizarre was the fact that someone had piled up the stone markers of the graves into two neat piles. Despite further investigations by Canadian authorities, the incident was never solved. Nina. When Nina disappeared from the scene in the summer of 2013, she was 85 years old. However, this was not an elderly lady, but a yacht that could look back on a proud history. Among other things, she won the New York to Spain regatta, and that just 1 month after her launch. In 2013, the traditional ship was once again owned by David Dyke, and David had big plans for Nina. He wanted to travel from New Zealand to the Australian city of Newcastle. No sooner said than done. In May 2013, the planning was completed, and David was ready to set sail together with his companions. Normally, the crossing would have taken between 8 and 10 days, but the days passed and Nina simply did not arrive at her destination. At first, however, the relatives did not suspect anything bad. Perhaps the wet and windy weather had merely caused a slight delay. But when this hope could no longer be maintained, the New Zealand authorities launched one of the largest search operations in the country's history. A total of 737,000 square nautical miles were searched, but the hoped-for hit failed to materialize. In the end, the authorities had to deliver the sad news that they could not find any signs of the ship or its crew. In addition to David Dyke, the missing persons were his then 60-year-old wife Rosemary and their 17-year-old son, who was planning to go to college in the United States. Kyle Jackson, Evie Nemeth, Danielle Wright, and Matthew Wooten are also among those who have been missing for 10 years. The Gill Family. On the evening of January 12, 2002, all was right with the world for the Gill family. To support their 4 children, Father Ruben and Mother Margarita were working as farmers in their native Argentina. But after months of hard work, it was time to take a well-deserved break. So it was that on the aforementioned January night, the family left to visit a friend in the nearby town of Vial. This was the last time they would be seen. The finca, where the Gills lived and worked, in turn, belonged to a man named Alfonso Goet. The latter contacted the family's relatives in April of that year, stating that the Gills had not returned from their 3-month vacation. The police investigation that followed revealed that Ruben's cell phone had been used to call a woman in the city of Rosario on January 13th, though officials were unable to locate her. Finally, in 2008, a raid was conducted at Goet's finca. As part of this, investigators found 3 traces of human blood, although these could not be attributed to the Gill family. In addition, some flies were discovered, which are usually associated with corpses. However, although the search for them was intensified several times and even continues to this day, no solid clue to the whereabouts of the missing persons was to be uncovered. It seemed as if the Gills had literally vanished into thin air. Their names do not appear in any employment, immigration, education, or social security records. Some people believe that Alberto Goet was involved in the disappearance of the family. The latter claimed that the Gills left all their belongings to him, including money and personal documents. But when the relatives visited the home, the said items were untraceable. Instead, they found some burned mattresses and blood mixed in with the dirt. In addition, it seemed very strange that Goet had allowed the Gills such a long vacation. In the past, he had given them a maximum of 15 days off at a time. In addition, the relationship between the two parties was said to be extremely strained. However, even if Goet was involved in the incident, it is no longer possible to hold him accountable today. He died in a car accident on June 16, 2016. Verde. It is 1923 when a group of travelers arrive in the small village of Verde in Brazil. Tired from the rigors of the last few days, the new arrivals were hoping to get some water and food in the settlement. But instead, they encountered a gaping void. As the troop began to examine the abandoned houses, they were confronted with a strange scene. The furniture was in its intended places, and on the tables were plates of rotten food. Nowhere could they find any sign of a struggle or the fate of the 600 villagers. Soon the travelers reached the next town, where they told the authorities what they had seen in Verde. The latter did not hesitate for long and immediately dispatched a commission of inquiry. The subsequent inspection then brought to light some strange things. In one of the houses, the men found a gun that had recently been fired, but it was not known why or at whom. The most disturbing discovery, however, awaited the investigators at the school. There, someone had written an ominous inscription on the blackboard that read, "There is no rescue." To this day, no one knows what really happened to the residents of Verde. One theory is that they fled because of political unrest in Brazil. But even if the entire community had left the country, wouldn't at least one of the 600 inhabitants have been discovered somewhere? Some even think it is conceivable that something supernatural occurred in the village. The corresponding speculations range from alien abductions to the crossing into a parallel world. The Dolo Case. If you type the words mass disappearance and Sweden into Google, you will find exactly one incident in this regard: the mysterious Dolo Case. This refers to an event that took place in Gothenburg on July 29, 1965, and is still unsolved. John Olof Dolo, Gary Carlson, and Kjell Aki Johansson were 3 friends who worked together in the shipyards. On the aforementioned July morning, the trio got into a blue Volvo to drive out of town. Their whereabouts are uncertain. Since none of the 3 had a driver's license, at least one of them must have gotten behind the wheel without permission. And although the young men had run afoul of the law in the past for minor offenses, they were known as good guys to those around them. But that's not all. On that very day, another person, Hubner Lundqvist, disappeared in Gothenburg. To this day, it is still a matter of debate whether the 2 cases are connected. The only thing that is certain is that Lundqvist sent a postcard to his family in Gothenburg that read, "All is well, don't worry." Don't miss upcoming top videos and subscribe.